performance is always something extra, touches everyone. The next session is actually consisting of two parts. The first one is going to be moderated by Benny Marcel, one of these Swedes escaping Sweden to Denmark. He's director of the Nordic Culture Fund in Copenhagen. And the second part will be moderated by Scott Stoner. I will say the name of the panel and then leave the microphone to the CEO of Swedish Performing Arts, who is hosting this session. In the panel we will have Jim Byrne, Gesa Kovic, Magnus Aspergren, Mika Romanus, and Adolf Binder. Adolphe Binder, sorry. Ulrika, are you here somewhere? There you are. You are also going to be in the panel. Will you tell us something about the session?
Am I on? I'll tell you everything once I'm on stage.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Thank you. Sorry.
It's no danger. They still do some stuff on stage, but they won't hurt you.
So, do you want me to? Are you done?
I can continue if you want me to.
No,
Should
I just want to make sure that.
Or you will be even more introduced.
No, I'm fine.
I can give you a hug.
Thank you. So, hello everybody, and welcome. And I shall not forget to welcome all those who are following us on the web. If you don't catch everything that we say now, you want to repeat things, it will be found on YouTube afterwards as well. So welcome to this seminar or meeting or discussion or talks about the Nordic model. As I was introduced, my name is Ulrika Holmgård and I'm the CEO of the Swedish Performing Arts Association, which is the branch and employee organization for most institutions actually from the northern parts to the southern parts of Sweden, the opera houses, theaters, dance venues and orchestras. And I'd say over 95% of our members are publicly funded. And I think you will hear during the discussion that we're quite heavily funded, and that's of course part of the Nordic model. I ask myself, why do we do this? Why do we initiate a talk like this? And to the Swedish Performing Arts Association, our overall goal is to support our members to actually create strong leaders. Leadership is key, and we have existed as an organization since 1943. That was in the midst of the Second World War, and someone found a reason to organize us. And the society that we live in today is not the same society as in 1943. It's very different there, and leaders have to go along with the changes. And one of the questions that I think we will address today would be who is actually taking the lead, who's following and who's leading. And what happens to the art, to the excellence, that we also would like to talk about when change comes about. I think we have a lot of interesting things to talk about in the next 90 minutes. And as Peter said, we've split this, the Nordic model, into two talks. And firstly, we'll intend to give you a bit of an introduction to the setting of a Nordic model by giving you a short glimpse of the history of the Swedish model that I think one could say sort of is also the Nordic and the Danish, Finnish and Icelandic. And like Virpi Pakkinen did an excellent performance here to start with, which was really nice. I sort of relaxed in that, running between all these seminars. It was wonderful. What is she Nordic? She's Finnish, but she goes as Swedish when we tour and so that's quite interesting too to see. I think this introduction of the Nordic model will give you a brief also for the second talk. So within the headline of Nordic model, our first 45 minutes will focus on inclusion, the connection between vision and the reality of daily life. The vision and reality, does it match? And our moderator, Benny Marcel, he will develop the topics further once he gets on stage here. And we've titled the second part, Inclusion, Accessibility, where representatives from different corner of the performing arts scene, they interpret the overall idea of culture for everyone. And our moderator there is, as we said, Scott Sterner from Washington. He's the Vice President, Programs and Resources at the Association of Performing Arts Presenters, the APAP. We had this group, the second group, we had a brilliant talk this morning about this, preparing ourselves, and I hope we will repeat ourselves today. So, without further ado, I'm very pleased to be able to introduce Mr. Benny Marcel. He's head of the Nordic Culture Funds in Copenhagen, a former Deputy Director General at the Swedish Arts Council. And at the same time, I think the rest of the panel could come up.
Yeah.
Do you think so?
Where are you?
That you will introduce them. Thank you.
Sitting good.
So, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Benny Marcel. I'm head of the Nordic Culture Fund, and I feel so excited, but also at the same time honored to moderate this 45-minute seminar with extremely interesting panel here on stage, covering every inch of what can be of interest when it comes to build and create visions, and at the same time facing facts of reality within the field of performing arts and cultural policy. I ask you all to fasten your seatbelts and ask you not to be too afraid, since this seminar might be one with highest degree of energy, right? And so inspiring, right? And creative, and one of the Congress highlights and most fun. Will we have an applause? No, we won't. We will here actually talk about models of inclusivity where, for instance, age, income and culture are not barriers to participation in cultural life. And we will touch upon and discuss what impact culture has in relation to creativity and delivery of artistic quality of excellence. We will, during this seminar, hopefully, with both a serious and humorous tone, try to capture the visions that there are for art and culture today, and try to see and reflect upon if these visions only are beautiful ceremonial words that are stacked upon each other, or if they are serious and integrated values in your respective day-to-day work. Trying to be even more specific, one can say, do the visions mean anything for you in your everyday life, or do they cause problems? And how would you describe the reality and daily life from your perspective and respective fields? Is there a connection between reality and vision? And I suggest that each of you in the panel, in a while, during no longer than 5 minutes, describe the vision, the reality, the gap there in between, and the realization of a culture policy which would catch all and everyone, while the resources simultaneously do not even cover basic funding. While you are now thinking about how you will do your presentation about visions and reality, I will describe how Sweden, in its official papers, describes the vision for art and culture. Listen now. Cultural policy in Sweden is undergoing change, a new direction which should give more people access to culture and increase possibilities to individual creativity. The new cultural policy should strengthen culture's role in society, as well as create better conditions for culture to influence society's development. Culture should be a dynamic, challenging and independent power with its roots in freedom of expression. Everyone should have the possibility to participate in cultural life. Our society's development shall bear the stamp of creativity, diversity, and artistic quality. What a model! What a method! Isn't it wonderful? What's the problem? Are there any problems at all? Jim, how would you like to catch up this vision?
Well, I was having some visions last night, but I think that was because I was out in a bar far too late.
Could also be a vision.
The Arts Council in England, over the last few years, has been very good, I think, in terms of encapsulating a clear set of goals for culture in England. Excellence, access, resilient organisations, leadership, and working with children and young people. Very clear, great art for everyone sort of goals. The problem is, though, that they're creating this clear picture, this clear vision in an environment where the resources are reducing very quickly. So is there a gap? And if there is a gap, what do you do about that? In England, it is changing. The public sector is reducing everywhere, it seems to me, around the world. We heard about Australia yesterday, stuff happening with the Australia Arts Council. In my city, the local authority cut its funding to the arts completely about 18 months ago. But in England, the real issue is that this particular government is really cutting back on city governments, on local authorities. So they were the biggest funder of culture in England, at about £1.2 billion of investment. And that will probably be 400 million. So it will have gone down by 2/3 by 2018. So we face a really serious issue for culture in the country. And on top of that, there have been some really interesting research reports done on culture in England. And one of them was the Warwick Commission, which really underlined the fact that the funding that the Arts Council gives to organisations is mainly spent on the rich middle-class elite. That's not particularly justifiable, and it doesn't play very well in terms of politics. The other kind of big issue is devolution, the thing that happened with Scotland, but the English regions is coming to the fore. But London gets 75% of all cultural investment for 15% of the population. And that, as a northerner, doesn't seem very fair to me. That's another kind of thing that's playing into this gap between what I see as a good statement about culture, but actually how you're actually going to deliver it is another question. I think the other thing that plays into this is we are living in an information age. We've left the industrial age behind us. And very shortly, we'll be hitting the new age, the conceptual age, where there will be more time for people to be more creative. And how do you prepare a country for that, and with reducing resources? So I think those are some of the questions. I've got a few answers.
I think it was a very good start. Is there any comments here in the panel? What he was saying right now.
Well, I wanted actually to start with historically to see why we are where we are.
Yeah.
Well, you sort of mentioned today's situation, and I just think that we had like 3 periods of cultural politics in Sweden. One was in the 1750s, one was in 1932, and then 1974. It was just major events. And first we had the king, Gustav III. He was the one introducing the Swedish academies and the Royal Opera, the Royal Dramatic Theatre, and then nothing happened until 1932. So we had this...
It's a dramatic gap.
Yes, it's a dramatic gap. And of course, that's an exaggeration, but it's also saying that we had now, for almost 100 years, we've been living the idea of the Swedish model. It was when the Social Democratic Party came to power in 1932, they introduced a new political decision-making process, and that was also taking culture into account. And it was also, it was like a social idea, and the idea was to spread and make good culture available to everyone all over Sweden in order to foster a national identity and a good democratic citizen, and that is, quote, what it was meant to in the 1930s. And it's interesting to see now what we are aiming for today.
Yeah.
What is the purpose?
What's the output?
What's the purpose and what's the output? And but I think we're quite used to actually having a national culture politics, but things are changing. And as you were talking about the reduction in the funding, we can see that despite having, I think there's 33% of the state budget, 0.33% of the state budget goes to the performing arts. It's quite a lot. Of course, we also have more money coming to Stockholm because that's where we have the Royal Opera and the Dramatic Theatre and the major institutions. But we also have, since 2011, the cultural collaboration model, Kultursamverkansmodellen,
Yes.
that is aiming for more of a decentralization of responsibility for culture on the regional and municipality level. And I would say that we are now within a situation where there was an agreement earlier on in the 20th century that there should be, in 1974 the politics stated, there should be culture for everyone, and it should be all over Sweden, and it's to be governed by the regional government, but the state would be there to financially back it up. End of the 1990s, this came to change, and since then we've seen it slowly. The state is slowly backing away now. And you know that because you've been working for the Arts Council in
Yeah,
museums.
but I'm in Denmark nowadays, you know, so I'm not
sorry.
allowed to comment on this.
Now you
specific
are
things,
allowed to
yeah.
comment
Yeah,
on
I'm
it, yeah.
allowed to
So we can
speak
see
out.
the share is changing. So
Yeah.
I'm posing the question because, as you stated
Yeah.
there, there's a lot of
Yeah.
rules and goals for what the state policies, politics, the cultural politics should lead to.
It's true.
But for how long can the state say this while at the same time backing? Do you have that in England, for example? I mean, is it still that you have some overall national idea of culture politics, despite them having backed so much so that you get funded by 30% only?
Jim, what's your comment? Is there a national identity?
There isn't. There is a Department of Culture, but it doesn't play anything like the same way that it does in this country. It is, the Arts Council is there, and it is arm's length. So you look to the Arts Council for that cultural policy, really.
But we have the same, the Arts Council, for they're carrying out the policies.
I think that I would like Gesa Kovac to bring some Central European melancholy into this discussion. What's your
as
part
I
of the
promised.
project? Yeah, you promised that.
From listening to Ulrika and Jim, I have to remember that at the early 90s, in the Central European countries, we met the problem of how can you continue, because finally we agreed to metamorphosis, and we had to admit that we lived in a zoo. And what began at the early 90s, it was more or less the jungle. So finally, many Central European countries and my colleagues, we agreed that we need a sort of safari. So after that very, very strong control of the communist, socialist, Soviet imperium type cultural policy, which was very strict in some countries and not so very strict in, for instance, others, in Hungary. But finally, in 90, we met the problem, what can we do with our freedom? And the second problem was obviously, what can we do with the public money? Because our American or non-European colleagues perhaps do not know how important public money is in our life. I think it's a feudalistic legacy, because kings, dukes, barons had a yacht, had orchestras, and they have financed arts more or less, and obviously church. But from the 90s, we met the problem, what can be done? And I think there are excellent examples to successes. New art centers grew up from Wrocław to Budapest, and excellent orchestras. You can see fantastic theaters. But the problem of arm's length principle is still a very, very sensitive problem in our countries. And unfortunately, the so-called hand-feeding system is more well known. After, for instance, elections, it's very important whom you know from the Ministry of Culture.
So that's the definition of hand-feeding.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And since Ulrika and me are the members of PEARL, which is the European Performing Arts organization. It's word-to-word Performing Arts Associations, Employers Associations League Europe. And Ulrika is the member of the board and I'm the vice president. I prepared a short presentation. Would you give me the clicker?
Absolutely.
Without it, I'm paralyzed, and I even don't know whether it works or not.
So while you're working that out, I would say that you were talking about Gustav III, Ulrika, and he also inspired Verdi's, Un ballo di mascherate. Isn't that true? Gregor, isn't that true? Yeah, absolutely. Gregor is right, always right.
So, we are Nordic Pole, I gave the title Inclusion and Access. And, we are speaking about that fantastic continent, which is called the cradle of the so-called Western Europe, the Jewish, Greek, Roman, Christian legacy based on these traditions. And it's geographically half of the continent because we know that the Ural Mountains are the eastern border of this continent. There were some people who had visions about a united Europe, and first they were speaking about coal and steel, but they couldn't avoid the question of culture. So now we can see that in the constitution of the European Union is the Union shall respect its rich cultural and linguistic diversity and shall ensure that Europe's cultural heritage is safeguarded and enhanced. Yes. Let's see now reality. There is an institution called Eurobarometer. On the website of the Eurobarometer, you will find a lot of surveys. It's the institution of the European Union. They made a survey comparing the situation in Europe between 2007 and 2013. And let's see some result. Speaking about the Nordic secret, the survey shows that the most common form of cultural participation in the EU is watching or listening to a cultural program on television or radio. It's disgusting, I think, isn't it? It's not true for each TV channels, but it's really disappointing.
Wasn't that a vision?
It's
was the reality.
And followed by reading a book, 68% down 3. The least popular activity is going to see an opera, ballet, or dance performance. Isn't it disgusting also? And in terms of frequency of participation in all types of cultural activities, from reading to visiting a museum, northern countries score highest. Led by Sweden, 43%, describe the rate of participation as high as very high, Denmark, 36%, and the Netherlands, 34%. It's quite high.
Was that including television?
Yeah.
Okay.
At the other end of the scale is Greece, the cradle of the European culture, where only 5% report high or very high participation rates. Portugal and Cyprus, 6%, Romania and Hungary, 7%, and Italy, 8%. Moreover, 34% of the European population say they never or hardly ever participate in cultural activities. 4% rise since 2007. This figure has significantly increased in some countries such as Hungary, Romania and Greece. The two main reasons for not participating or not participating more in cultural activities are lack of interest, the first reason given for 5 out of the 9 activities tested, and lack of time, the first reason given for the remaining 4 activities. And finally, however, cost as measured by too expensive responses in an obstacle for many Europeans, particularly in Eastern European countries, Romania, Bulgaria and Hungary, and in some of the countries worst affected by the economic crisis, Greece, Portugal and Spain. And finally, over half of Europeans use the internet for cultural purposes.
Well, what's the panel's comment?
Respondents from northern countries are most likely to use the internet for cultural purposes than those from southern and central eastern European countries. So I think these data are sometimes shocking. Shocking, and what's the vision?
What's the vision?
So the windmill fight can be continued or not. Obviously, we won't give up. And
you won't give up, you said? No?
No. We won't. We won't give up. And the Nordic example is really amazing for all of us, but I think we have to see reality. There were, as we always used to say, that there were no war for more than 200 years in Scandinavia. No, in Sweden, sorry. It can be one reason. The second reason, that half of the year is dark in these countries. Yeah. What else can you do? You can drink.
What else can we do?
We can do a lot of things.
Meet your friends or girlflirts, and you sing in choirs, go to theaters.
We are very well
excellent.
in organizing ourselves, I think. Otherwise, we couldn't survive at all in this climate. It's true.
So, however, we are really interested of your secret. How do you do? Even though we have fantastic values, but these data, these informations are really shocking for everyone.
I think it's interesting when you see this. I mean, statistics can be used in so many ways, and if you say that was part of television as well, radio and TV, that was all included, then it's even more depressing.
But I think it's gardening there as well, isn't it?
Sorry?
In that study, gardening is also part of the
that was
culture.
without knowing exactly. It's so hard. But of course, we can see that there is. But we still say we have only for theatre and dance in Sweden there are like 7 million tendencies on a year. I don't know. I think this is like a couple of years old figures, 2, 3. So I think there's still an audience. But the thing we're talking about here now, from a national cultural politic way, is how to include more people, right? I mean, we talk about this. There's a vision how people should be included. We talk about inclusion.
Yes.
And one thing I say that it was never that way. I want to sort of ask: is that really a vision? Is that really something that is reachable? Is it a goal that you can reach? And everyone.
Geza, what is your comment?
Well, I grew up in a little village in Hungary. And at that time, at the late 50s, early 60s, it was absolutely normal that people went to library, they gathered, they organized themselves in choirs, dance groups. And the connection between the cultural managers, who were teachers, librarians, chorus masters, was very personal. And I remember in '63, when I was a little schoolboy, the village bought a television to the school, and hundreds of people gathered to watch television, paying a small amount, and we have been watching the William Tell and this kind of series in the television, and I think this was the first moment where the personal connections has been awakened, and we began to lose something. I'm not blaming technology, because we live it deep, by the way, yes. So we use it moment by moment, but that was a moment when the personal contacts began to be weaker and weaker, and that was the moment when we cultural managers, arts managers, should have learned how to create on a different level a personal contact, because it's the only way, I think, to convince people to join what we love. And we know that it's really valuable. And in my personal experiences, personal contacts and personal conviction is the only way to seduce people to a concert, to a good theater, to call my friends that,
Yes.
hey, there is fantastic in one of the Budapest theaters or in Vienna. So the personal contact, without personal contact, I think any marketing, fantastic marketing tools are useless and not enough.
So it's not really enough with a vision then. It needs to be, I mean, personal contacts, and it needs networkings,
Absolutely.
and it needs
Absolutely.
congresses like the ISPA Congress to highlight what is on. And of course, I would like you to reflect on this again, I mean the visions, because they are stated by the government. But Ulrika, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, but I talk about the visions. I think that we talk about collaboration all the time, and,
Yeah.
and also this, how do you get a chance to influence and to do, make art matter? And I think that the culture politics must work much closer to other parts of the political arena.
Yes.
It has to be much more of a collaboration there. It can't be just on its own trying to sort of save society. I don't know what is...
But it needs to be financed as well from
It
the
needs to be
foreign
financed, but we
enthusiasm.
do have it. I mean, I talked from the point. I want to get back to talk about leadership as well, the importance of leadership in
Yes.
order to actually be able to carry out these
Yep.
things. And I don't mean that it should be a representative that the white middle-aged man, which is still a bit dominating here, should be the one to sort of try to interpret what to be done. We have to see a change in middle management. We have to see how, and this is a task. And I think I've been to APAP and ISPA in New York, and it was the same talk there. How do we broaden the management? Because that's the one way of changing it. But the other way is also to have politics change the way they work. Because the way it goes now for our members is that there is, you were talking about that, there's more and more tasks
Yes.
that are being asked, being put on, in order to still maintain some kind of relevance and to get the taxpayers' money. There's more and more asked by the institutions to be done. And at the same time, as this is being implemented, money is scarce and it's less and less money.
Yes.
So the way to get that money is to collaborate. Because if you get a task that if you ask the institution in your region, you should be more responsible for educating people. You would normally say that that's the educational department's thing to educate.
Yes.
But they're not part of it.
No.
And I think this is one thing that we have to really demand.
Yeah. Jim and Geza, you would like to add something?
Yeah, I agree with what's being said, but I think there comes a time when the gap between your what's being said and what's being asked of you and the resources that you have at hand means that you have to do something else.
Yes.
So you have to design another way of looking at the world in order to continue to invest in culture, to involve more people in culture, to hire more artists. And again, in England, very recently, there's been a launch of a couple of funds, which are funds that lend money to arts organisations. So they have to pay it back.
Yes, yes.
So they need to sort of think differently about those resources. And I think that is what the future holds for many that work with a lot of public sector resource that's probably going to dwindle.
Yes.
And I've just got a few...
Yeah. Time flies,
It
actually.
does, yeah.
We do have some 10 minutes.
Oh,
13.
13. Sorry.
13, 40.
She decides.
So,
Ulrika decides.
at Live, I know some of you have seen this before, but we have designed a series of social enterprises that generate income for the charity. We have effectively 5 projects that we're working on now. We have a gastropub, we have a digital business, which is training playwrights. We have an SME incubator, small business incubator, with buildings attached to us. And we're just in the middle of a large-scale capital project. We've effectively bought our corner of the city. And the Broad Chair owns us a play a year. Costs us about £120,000 to make a play. Be a Playwright pays for an education project. the schoolhouse earns us about £50,000 a year, which is one of our annual youth theatre festivals. And this site, which is being developed now, in fact it'll be finished in September, we are putting a new office block. So basically where you see Live, those buildings to the right of that on the corner and all the way up the street, they're all owned now by Live Theatre. And that should be open and let in October. And sorry, just go back. And then this is a very important space. This is the back of the office, outdoor stage, park, and a children's literacy centre, which I'll talk a bit more about later. But the point of doing all these things is a recognition that the Arts Council, or the government, don't have the money. The Arts Council don't have the money. We have to do it ourselves. And it's been a long-term game for us. But we've raised about £22 million, and eventually we'll get £500,000 a year from our endeavours that will be spent on artists and arts education and new plays. And I think we're in a stronger position as a result of having had to do this than if we had more money from the Arts Council.
Interesting.
So I think it's about trying to do some of it yourself.
Gesa.
Well, speaking and thinking about vision, the European Union and in many countries, from a point of view of a pragmatic way of thinking,
Yes.
Culture is the part of creative industry. But if we see a wider horizon, we have to think, for instance, Zoltán Kodály, who was an excellent composer, and in the 1920s, 30s, he had a vision that with the tools of music and with the knowledge of music, the nation can be more clever and more creative. So he has been fighting for music lessons every day in every schools. And his vision was that every Hungarian citizens in the future can read music, and music will be a daily bread of everyone. Based on this vision, at the 60s and early 70s, Abreu in Venezuela had also a vision that with the tools and the skills of music, a nation's social problems can be solved somehow. It's not simply a pragmatic point of view, but the faith that arts are not simple about daily life. Thanks God, arts are much more than we can say in words. It's true mostly about music and dance, but even dramas. So if we have to convince some decision makers, politicians, about the direction of cultural policy, we can offer them, and we should offer them, this kind of pragmatic things that in one generation, a nation can be more clever than all the others before. And with the tool of art, it can be reached. But we, the priests of this religion, we know that it's more something about more, not simply about practical things. Because in many multinational companies, artists are warmly welcomed, philosophers sometimes. You wouldn't think it 30 years ago. But nowadays, when politicians in some countries has a lot of power, I think this way of thinking can help arts to have more people who want to be accessed and can be included. And
yes,
involved.
so there is a renaissance, and it's also sort of a paradigm going on at the same time.
Yep.
And I think that is rather interesting, and I would like you, shortly, to consider whether there is a national cultural policy worthy of its name, and which gives support and guidance to your assignments. Are the national visions clear for you? And who are tasked with realizing them? Is it the one that are doing it, or should it be the decision makers? And what are your own personal reflection on this? Are you feeling a gap or a need in the society by doing what you're doing? And which method would you favor, advocate for, so that the words can become a reality? And who would you like to see will pay for this? The public or the private? Just some small questions, but I mean, you are brilliant, so you can make it in 1 minute each, right? Jim?
Thanks. I think that you should be judged by what you do rather than by what you say.
Yeah.
And so I'm a pragmatist. You know, I want to do more new plays, work with more artists, do more arts education, and no vision is going to give me all of the tools I need to be able to do that. So just put me on the ground and let me run.
Great. Keza?
Well, speaking about money, I think public and private money is really, really very important in our lives. So it's an obligation for each states, each governments to share the taxpayers' money in a very, very transparent way, which is not true for each European countries. Not only Europeans, but we are speaking about now here about the Swedish, the Nordic and the European model. The second is obviously it's an obligatory for private industry owners and all those who were lucky in their life. It's like in the United States, it works for more than 100, 150 years. It's a moral obligatory. So I think both are very important. And in the Central Eastern European countries, transparency would be the most important and the public control of sharing public money.
Ulrika, I'm trying to conclude this panel, but we can go on, I mean, for forever and ever. But I think I would like to say that by your presentation here today, you have clearly stated and agreed that change is in the air, right? Yeah. And that society needs a strong cultural life, and this cultural life need to be more anchored in cultural policy objectives that promote the accessibility to culture in every respect, not at least with a living, concrete networking. But Ulrika, I would like to give you the final word and give you the smallest little bit of a question of all the questions. Can you tell us where is the answers and what are the big questions?
Who we are, where do we come from, where are we going?
Speaking.
No.
No. You want? You want?
No, I mean, no. I couldn't
There
do
are
that.
no answers.
There are so many answers. I mean, could you repeat the question? Questions?
Yeah. What's the questions?
Yeah. Do you just repeat them?
Yeah, I will do that. Where is the answers? And what are the big questions on our time? When it comes to visions and reality,
yes,
not
yes,
the whole bit.
yes.
No.
Collaboration. I think for the future it's collaboration, and I think go with the flow. And I think when you talk about diversity, you never gave me the final question here. And
No,
I think
never.
that
Because I thought you would
if the
round up
national
here.
culture policy,
Yeah.
I'd say Sweden definitely has. We have one. We have really, and we're strong. I think, I mean, everyone must agree with that. We have a very strong still policy of what culture should be like and for. But we are seeing tremendous changes in society. And if we talked a little bit about diversity and the need for that 20 years ago, I think this is the thing that we're going to talk about even more. And I think that when I said it before, I think that the answer to this is to work together and to collaborate, and also to just see look at society and see what does it look like. And we've always said that what we show and what we do on stage should sort of reflect what's out there. We've talked about diversity for many years now in the terms of representation. And I'd say that we left that to be, I mean, if you had one person on stage looking a bit differently than the rest, then that was kind of check the box. And we left that, and then we talk about representation with reference to the audience, that we would do the same stuff on the stage that we always used to do, but we would find a new audience for it. And we left that too. And now we're talking about the diversity in forms of competence and inclusion. And I think that would be the thing for anyone working with publicly funded performing arts to really try to grasp and understand. And there's no point in trying to fight things. I think we just have to talk about it. Okay, how do we do it the best way? We have a good society. What do we do? So, I don't have the answers, of course, but this is something that we have to talk about.
Thank you, dear panel, for your statements, and thank you for listening to this session. I will now hand over to Scott Stoner. Are you there? Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Gesa. And you will stay on.
I'm staying, yeah.
This was mine, doesn't matter.
So you see the time. You want to fill in here? So as Ulrika said, we had a very dynamic, lively discussion this morning over breakfast, so we should have brought our box lunches in here and ate, because the best conversations happen over food, I think, anyways. But here we are with this. I'm with APAP, as you know, which is our national service organization for the performing arts presenting field in the U.S. Most of you think we're located in New York because we do this big convening every January in New York City, but we're actually based in Washington, D.C., where we're closest to the policymakers and the action. So I'd like to continue this thread of conversation and focus. This was a bit about inclusion and access. I'd like to get us talking a little bit deeper and broader about the area of access. We talked this morning, and probably about more of the depth and the breadth when we talk about making the arts accessible. And we generally talk about, well, we want to make the arts accessible to every member of the community. And this morning we decided what the core is. That is the core question. Are we really attempting to reach every single person? And if that's the case, do we have to do everything with our own organization? So it's interesting, this line of folks up here, because we have an artistic director, we have somebody who's very steeped in the policy at the national level from the Arts Council. We have someone who is actually doing work in hubs around the country. And we have someone, the entrepreneurial thread here with Jim, and then Ulrika, who is looking out for the rights of the arts sector and the trade side of things. So I think it would be interesting to get kind of a perspective from each of you on this issue of access and this thread from your perspective. And let's start, Jim, I'd like to see you take a little further the entrepreneurial side of things, but why, and how are you reaching deeper into, and who are you attempting to reach in terms of access with what you're doing?
Yeah, I think all of this, the really important bit about what we all do is what's the mission of your organization? Not so much what the mission or vision of the Arts Council or Department of Culture is, but what are you there for as an organization? And we talk about unlocking the potential of young people. Great new plays, developing talent, unlocking the potential of young people, and thinking of new ways to grow. That's effectively what our mission is. And access is the ability to approach. That's the sort of definition of the word. So you're creating the environment where people who wouldn't normally come or can't come to your cultural offer, creating a way for them to be able to approach you is what I think is important, and what you need resources for. So if live theatre is entrepreneurial, it is because we really do believe that access to culture and to art is a key part of being a human being, an education factor, as Geza said earlier. One of the things that we're doing with the project, the last project, LiveWorks, is creating a park, an outdoor stage, a place for people to sit, We've got some of the best restaurants in town. If you're ever in Newcastle, you must come and eat at my restaurants. But really importantly, we're doing a creative writing literacy centre for children and young people, based on the David Eggers 826 model. Now, some Americans will know about this, but it's you use hundreds of volunteers. You can reach thousands of children and young people, and you inspire their creativity for them to address their issues of literacy. And so that opens in a couple of months. And effectively, what the new office development is doing is funding that programme. And why are we doing that? Well, because the northeast of England has the poorest literacy rates in the UK.
So in a sense, you're establishing place, which is something that we are doing in the US, is this whole notion of placemaking for the arts. And so it's establishing kind of a centralized community feel and an identity by this safe place for the arts.
Yes.
Often we think of the place for the arts as being a theater or a concert hall.
No, I always describe ourselves as being much more than a theatre, because we do artist training, because we have big education programs anyway, because we have great restaurants, and now we're going to have a park and outdoor stage. So it's trying to embed your organisation and your mission of the organisation into the city, into the ground. Because if you are embedded properly in your city, you will be loved by the community, and therefore you'll ride any storm.
And Magnus, you're kind of establishing places all over the country. Talk a little bit about what you're doing.
It's Riksteatern, the Swedish National Touring Theatre or Performing Arts. We do a lot of theatre and we do dance and etc. But we are owned by all these organizations around Sweden, 230 organizations, theatre organizations. And we also have about 40,000 members. And it all started in 1933 as an idea to spread good quality theatre for the whole Sweden, because the situation during that time was that it was all placed in the big cities. So it was a way to educate the poor Sweden with theatre. So that was a wonderful idea. But of course today, so what we did then was to create a wonderful professional wonderful theatre plays around with Dramaten, the Swedish drama theatre. But of course today, to educate and what we do needs to, you need to think how to do it today. And of course we had seen a big change with the Riksteatern today, what we do. And as you have spoken about here, it's about collaborations and to reach the goals that we have, to reach so many as we can. But of course, in that case, you need also to make decisions and choose. So what we did the last 10 years now is also because we also work with sign language, as I said, with dance, but also that we have so many citizens from different countries in Sweden. We decided very cleverly, that was before I came, to work with the Bosnian language and with the Turkish and the Finnish, and we created and took theater or dance or whatever from these countries and taught it and created new organizations. And that's something that, of course, we need to develop today, and it's a big challenge, but it's necessarily we need to do that to reach as many as we can.
So you're in effect targeting a very global audience, multicultural, multi-ethnic, What about generational, cross generations? How are you targeting?
Yeah, I mean, of course, that's the thing that we discuss quite a lot now, because the organizations are quite old. I mean, the people, they work for free, and of course, when you don't have work, you are quite old. And you have an idea of what kind of theater you would like to see. And today we see that so many people are around, and how do we connect this? And of course then we need to work outside our organization to bring in, or sometimes we don't need to bring in. It can happen outside and outside, and also create new organizations. And especially with young people, you can't really say think you should do it like this. You need to let it happen, and you need to also use the money that we have, because we have money from the state, quite a lot, and also say, okay, what would you like to do? And how, and of course, let it go with the flow, and see what's happening. And sometimes it's quite risky, and things happen, and sometimes it's not working, but most of the time it really works. And then also to connect it back and see how you can continue. But you need to collaborate, and you need to work from inside, not from the perspective of Stockholm, or and also to understand the local society, and of course our members that working there, is their decisions, and they have to decide what to do. So to manage this as a managing director is wonderful. In many ways.
Let's go to the core, the art, the actual making of the art. How are you thinking about that now, again, in terms of accessing audiences, and thinking about who your target audience may be or may not be? How does that work in your creative process and your decision making as an artistic director?
Well, what I'm trying to do, not being from Sweden but living in Sweden since 4 years, is to implement a vision that is very much driven by an intention-based programming and art making. So the purpose of gathering people in one space and exchanging information and energy, which is one of the last unique places we can do in the theater, is the driving motor for this doing. I think I represent a fairly unique setup, because we are a resident company, a contemporary company in an opera house. I'd say one of the biggest in Europe, with 38 dancers, if not in the world. And since a few years, we have the green light from our boards and from our regional politicians to focus strictly on creations, on own work. So what we do is we create new pieces, and that often have no big names or titles, but to purposely seek for subjects, for themes that are resonating in society, build a bow throughout the season, and reflect onto the subjects from different angles. And to do that, I invite different makers, artists, choreographers, but not only visual artists, who are interested in the specific subjects, like migration, for instance. We did a whole season on the migrant body, like some 3 years ago, or on the subject, on the subconscious, collective and individual subconscious. So for me, it's very much how do we connect a formerly traditional organization to the city, to the art form on an international level. So my assignments are on different layers, as well as yours from the Rikstheatern. But what sets the tone for me is very much how do we connect, not just to the city, but to the to mutual human condition, or to a reflection about what can it be, how do we ask questions, and how we bring artists together to create a platform to pose questions. So I rather say trying to go against the flow than with the flow. So we're trying to really rather occasionally also disturb a bit. So more in the sense of we're not necessarily here to be liked, but to make a difference. So that's a bit the pace of what I'm trying to implement there, and until now it's been going quite well. But it's also a quite unique setup, because again, it's a original works creating contemporary dance company in an opera house. We're sharing the stage, we have a regional assignment, and then also, of course, we need a certain visibility internationally. But the drive is what is it that we want to communicate? What is it? What gets us together with people in a space, and how do we want to exchange in different proximities? Yeah, we have a house that has 1,400 seats, big stage that comes with a certain responsibility, but beyond that, how to create and how to connect to the contemporary context and discourse, how to invent new formats, how to go from small stage to site-specific to human-specific productions, and how to implement it into the value system of such an organization, and make everybody also understand that these are core values into the future that we have to more and more enhance for our own credibility, but also yeah, the whole perception of the arts has changed so drastically over the past 20 years. I mean, if you think of pre-internet times, pre-YouTube times,
Right.
it's not that long ago. So there's not the same viewers, not the same makers than some 20, 30 years ago.
And do you receive Arts Council funding?
We receive Arts Council funding through the distribution of the regions. We receive quite a lot. That's the lucky thing. We can make the things we're doing, and Sweden enables us and backs us to take this risk, because we never know what is the outcome of a production. Do we reach the 1,800 people that we need to have in a performance every evening? So yeah, we have like 65-70% funding, and then we have a bit of sponsorship, ticket sales. Our house has a restaurant, so it's a whole environment that buffers what we're doing. Of course, also the income of the other art forms like opera and musical. Yeah.
So Mika, speaking
Yes.
of arts funding.
Speaking of arts funding, yes, the Arts Council is an agency under the Minister of Culture, and
Democracy.
yes, culture and democracy. It's the title of our new minister, which I think some of you listened to yesterday.
Yes.
And as you heard, there is a lot of energy in this new ministry, and hopefully we will see that this will actually get some things happening according to this very important issue of access, because it's as Benny referred to in the first part, making culture available to everyone and to be able to take part and participate and also experience culture activities have always been a very strong part of cultural policy in Sweden. And that's also how we formed these institutions all over the country, and institutions like the one Magnus represents, that we should have a national level covering everything. And as we also heard before, Sweden has a very high level of participation, generally speaking. But what we know is that it's pretty much just the same people going many times. But still, we have a model that's been working so far pretty good. But now the great challenge is to how do we take this into the future? And yesterday, in the introduction from the mayor of Malmo, he described the changes that the city has been going through the past year, and that's a change that's all over the country. So we have to find ways to, within the frameworks of cultural policy, that makes the systems, the funding schemes and the systems so flexible that they can actually take into account that we have a totally different world today, and the ways that we need to meet these new audiences can be totally different than what we used to think it was. So that's, I think, the Arts Council's most important challenge right now, not to look at, okay, we used to count this way and we used to value this. It's totally different. Maybe we have to look at, well, how many people did this performance actually reach in other ways, not the traditional ways. So that's how we have to work in. And also, I think cultural policy is to find that crossing, giving people what they long for and need, but also what surprised them and stimulate the curiosity of what they don't meet. So in that crossroad, we have to find a way. But I think collaboration is essential. And I think also that's one of the good things with this new model of collaboration that we have found now in Sweden, is that on the regional level, we see that the cultural policy is interacting very closely with other kinds of areas, political areas, on the regional level, and that could give a great impact. But it's always very important to keep the core of the cultural policy to heart, that the culture should have the possibility to be challenging society and putting the right questions to everyone and making them reflect on things.
Right. Just 1 minute. The audience, you have 5 minutes, and then I'm hoping to get some questions from you. This is going to be an interactive session, not just talking heads. So be thinking about some questions or comments you might want to make to these folks, please. Ulrika.
I was just thinking, but so far, when you talk about the collaboration on the regional level, it hasn't led to it led to tasks to be done, to be fulfilled, but it hasn't led to co-sponsoring. I mean, the money has not come.
The regional money has come.
Well, the regional one has come, but that's from the cultural funding. So I mean, but we don't see that participation from other political areas. Or do you?
I don't agree necessarily. I think we see some money from other political coming into account, yes. I think it has to be collaborations across the usual partners. Maybe like something like Jim described also, that you see different things working together. We have some ways to go. This is,
we have a little bit, yeah,
yes,
but that's good.
Ways to
We've
go.
got things to do, that's good.
Yep.
There was many questions there, but I was thinking one lead with talks that we've had now is, of course, from an employer point of view, is that we have new demands on that come from a technological point of view, new demands on distribution, for example, with the digitalization, which then further on leads to the question of the artistic, or the core. I mean, we do talk about live performing arts. How does it survive being digitalized? I mean, what happens with the room and where you're experiencing? So, I mean, that's another question, and it's, of course, something that we have to talk about. But it's also costly. And we do know that we are getting less fundings from the state, but at the same time, there are expectations that we will do more. And we are doing more. Out of I think that 60% of our members, they answered recently in a survey that we did, that they've started and they carried out digitalized distribution. But distribution is, of course, just one way of talking about technology in order to reach out. But this is also, on the other hand, where we see that less money and higher demands and expectations. On the other side, we have with the artists themselves, and this is a question of the collective agreements. How will we sort of meet the expectations that people that do things that 20 years ago were 100% were employed in our houses, and now they're freelancers? How will there be some kind of extra money for that? So far, we're talking about the BUS, barn, unga, sjuka, youth, with kids and health. The sick people, which is like, it's not a market where we think that we will actually get a lot of money when we start distributing, but it's something that we have to do because we publicly fund it. So that is a challenge when we talk about this now from this point of view. It's a challenge for us.
But do you not think that the money is just going to disappear? You know, more. It's never. You know, I think public funding for culture will always be there, but is it not just going to get less? And if it is going to get less, what are we all going to do to make sure that we continue to do
that's
things?
That's why I say we want to use it. We want to use, for example, we want to use money, and that's what we do. 60% of our members are doing it already, and I mean, it's increasing, in order to reach out better, to be in places. Sweden is a long country, as you might have noticed, and there's like one fourth of this Swedish area is very densely populated. And we have to do something if we still want to live up to this, the core value culture for everyone. And then we might have to back a bit on this thing, that we have an idea that the artistic, the content, it's important, and you have to experience live. We might, back on that and say, no, that's not the key thing. We want to distribute it, and we want to reach out the entire Sweden.
Yeah, but
yes.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, but to live in a small village in Sweden, and to say that the solution is that we distribute via the internet or via the fiber or whatever, I mean, it's not really the solution. And then, of course, how do we deal with these small villages and when you talk about the man-to-man situation, or who it was before, that is so necessary, but it's so costly. I mean, to tour and to make these meetings, because it's about meetings, and also to count the meetings before the really thing that happens that night, and how do we deal with that? So what we now try to deal with more and more is the way to the performance or the thing that will happen.
You bust them.
Yeah, we bust them.
Yeah.
But of course you also want the small village. Of course you can bus, but also what is it there? And of course you need to be aware of the people that are there, and maybe to do it differently than we used to do. Because we always say, okay, do you have the message of, because this is the performance that we do, but no, we don't. Okay, then we leave you, then we go, and we can bus you. But what can we do there? And of course we need the local perspective.
I think it's also interesting to think about the generational shift, and we've been looking a lot at the millennials now, and the millennials are all about experience. And it's got to be a social experience. This came up in the last discussion. And in order to be a social experience, they believe that if it's going to be of great value to them, they will pay for it. They will get there. They will bring their friends, and they will do it. And if you look at the way people do spend whatever resources they have, that's something that's important in terms of, again, access and the kind of ways in which we think about providing access. In Washington, D.C., for example, we do broadcast, the Washington Opera broadcasts to the baseball stadium twice a year, a live performance. And it's filled. The baseball stadium is filled. And that's their experience. It's not there in the house itself, but it's live. It's a live experience. And that fosters many more experiences just in terms of connecting with arts and culture. The expectation is not that they're going to go and buy an opera ticket and can go that, but they might go and see something else, and they might, instead of going to the next baseball game, they might go to a concert or something
else. Cross a threshold of a museum or a gallery just by that experience.
Yeah, exactly. Any questions, comments from the audience? Please don't be shy. Yes. Do we need a microphone, or can you?
Yeah, I think there's a microphone there. No, there's a microphone.
Yeah.
Is there a microphone?
Could we have the house lights up, please?
Yeah, bring the lights up, please.
Is this yours? No, that's
Just identify yourself, please. Yeah.
Hey, thank you for a very fine discussion so far. My name is Per Wortmann. I'm the director of Nordic Culture Point in Helsinki, but I'm actually from Denmark, and now I'm here in Sweden. When you're discussing this topic about what should art and culture do for society, and how large could we expect the future financing from the public side to be, it springs to my mind, and particularly after Ulrika's intervention, could culture or should culture be used for any kind of purpose in society? Are there any limitations? Because if we're going to use taxpayers' money for something, it might be of use to the taxpayers, that's obvious. But are there any limitations in how we could or should use culture? That springs to my mind when I hear your discussion.
Anyone want to take that?
It's a really brilliant tool, isn't it? It works in health. It works in crime settings or in prison settings. It works in terms of psychology, working with children, getting confidence up in youngsters. It's a brilliant tool, but I wouldn't necessarily advocate that it has to be instrumental. I think the power of art is the power of art, and I think but it is an incredible tool, and it's a very effective tool in terms of social welfare projects.
I think you talked earlier this morning, the way you explained the way you work is really great, where you said that it can be great excellence. You could work with really highly professional on one stage, and then you could do something else. It doesn't have to be the same. One institution doesn't have to do everything, but one institution could do different things, so it's very individual. And I think it could also be, calling it a tool, but it could be a mean. It's always a mean, I think, for greater stuff. But I think that it's also important to really defend this core thing that Adolf and I were talking about, this, the excellence, and that you can strengthen yourself and the artistic profile and really be a master of something. And it all exists in society, parallel. It's just that you have to figure out if you're the one that will sort of do it. And I think that this is something that we talk about with with the policymakers? I mean, what are you actually asking? When we had this talk this morning, you said, Adolphe, that you felt that you had to do everything that was on the Arts Council list. That you should reach out, you should reach in and up and down, and everything was there, you should do it. But Mika, you meant that that's not what we mean. What do you mean?
No, I was actually thinking about that also. I think, no, we were talking about that everyone has to do everything. And I said, no, that's not everyone has to do everything. But of course, if you're a big institution receiving a lot of public money, yes, their expectations are great. So you have to do a lot. But generally speaking, for public policy, everyone is not interested in everything. So, but at least everyone should be able to get some arts and culture into their lives. Right. That's the important part. And over time, the government will see areas where there should be extra necessary to work harder on. And the access issue is always there. So if you are an institution receiving a lot of public money, yes, I think you always have to work at reaching a broader audience. But you don't have to do everything. I mean, you don't have to produce productions for every age group every year. But you always have to work to be relevant in society today. But you can be that in many different ways. Not only the traditional ways.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I was first teaching school, I was teaching in a city school in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, where I'm from. And it was a low-income school. And the superintendent of schools was very supportive of the arts because he said, the arts are levelers of experience. And I've thought about that through the years and through my career. And in a way, it's true. No matter where you are in the economic scale, what your resources are, what your background is, when you come together with a group of people to experience something of the creative work, you're all the same in that way, and that's very powerful. So the question is that is a responsibility that we have to make certain that it is going to be an experience that everyone is able to take in and assimilate, and that's where there's got to be some level of context and content. This is something we talked about this morning also, is this notion of, yes, it's fine to be controversial and put something out there, but if you've not framed it as a presenter, if it's not been framed or contextualized in any way, it can really create some real issues and problems that you never anticipated or didn't really want to happen.
We're also walking a fine line. We have to make sure that we're not falling into the trap to just fulfill and feed what is out there. Because, for instance, there's a certain given in our structure. We have lots of discussions because we also have to increase income to cover our costs. The resources are becoming smaller and smaller in general, and the prices increase. So we have our cash cow, our core bonus, actually to perform musical in our house, and we do like 100 performances of musical. And how do we really communicate then the diversity of one place already into a city that is like up the road 2.5 hours from here? It's like 500,000 to 1 million inhabitants with a greater area, which is it's an event city. Yeah, people are real football fans. It's a former working class city. So how do you reach out into these different communities of 180 different nationalities and be credible in what you do, and not just for the sake of pretending to reach out, but to get it from your guts and be really credible. So for instance, our dance company has like 19 different nationalities, which sort of mirrors something in a global village way, that where you can say, okay, this is a microcosm of what exists out there, and come and find out how that is. And we are lucky to be able to communicate beyond language and the spoken word, so that gives chances. But it's very easy to fall into the trap just to consider how many covered seats do we have, how much income do we really make, and therefore we are lucky. We're in a very lucky situation here up north, but nevertheless we also need the income. And how do we walk that path of a stronger and stronger demand for entertainment also up here? So.
Any other? Yes. back here.
Hello. My name is Osiel. I represent the Swedish culture organization Selam. And we have had diversity and inclusion as part of our core issues since starts, and that's 18 years ago. I would like to pose the question, might we be in need of new measurement of the outcome, the fulfillment of the political culture goals? And why I'm asking this is that the culture policy in Sweden has been quite clear when it comes to the goals within diversity and internationalization. But very little has happened, especially within the authorities, cultural authorities and the institutions. Might we need new ways to measure, because the missing out of reaching the goals within this sector would not have been acceptable within other areas, political areas like job employment fulfillment or educational area, health sector, but here we're totally missing the goals, and there is no way to hold anyone accountable for this. So it's not a new question, it has been debated in Sweden for 30 years. So what can we do from now, and what new tendencies do you hear from the new government that we have?
Are we missing the goals?
Yes, are we missing the goals?
We are missing the goals.
How much are we missing? Can we measure the missing?
No, the problem is the measuring question is, I think we do need to find new ways of measuring, but I think we have not reached the goals. I think we all know that we're far from the goals, even though we have been successful in some areas, but there are ways to go. And I think you're absolutely right. I think we need new ways to measure, but I don't have the answers to what they should be.
But when you say that we reach them, would you say that we reach them within the youth? For example, the goals to reach out for the youth?
No.
Is there any goal that we've reached?
That we can say check? No, I don't think we can say check in any box, really.
We're total failure.
Yeah, but the problem is that we don't measure these things in one way, because we don't have these goals that how many.
But you have some kind of thing that you do. We talked about this morning, and we said that you do these plays, specifically for people from an ethnical point of view. So that ethnicity, Iran, Iraq, or Syria, what it might be, and you create, and you say, but you're still there. You're quite white, middle-aged men in power, and then you say that we think that they need. Or how do you do that? Or do you call someone in to say, but the Iranians, they will like that? Or how do you do that? And I was also thinking, don't you sort of really make it even more like a segregation when you do that instead? I mean.
In one way we do, but I think it's better to do that than to do nothing, because this is a part of the population that have nothing, because they don't join the ordinary theaters or venues. So in one way there was, and of course the big challenge is how do we put this together. But what we see, because we do some measurements, is that we have lost something for the ordinary audience that we have had. We lost some because, of course, when we spend more money doing this kind, we increase the audiences in this level. So and we can see that we reach about 60,000-70,000 per year with this. Language roads that we do. And so yeah. So
but that could, does it about talking about reaching goals then? What happens? If you do that, it costs extra money. It's more expensive to do this because you have to sort of single out and you have to work it in a different way. But how long? If you do it in 2 years' time, do you see a change? Do you have a goal that this should be some kind of like? Eventually, everyone will meet, no matter what kind of language you have and or what you.
Yes, that's something that we discussed, because in some way you say, okay, that's wonderful that everybody meet and like the same thing. People like different things and have different ideas and different perspectives, different way of living and experience and etc. And of course, we need to have this kind of work we have not done at all before, and of course we then need to measure and see. And sometimes you don't need to mix. You just have to be aware of that. We do this, and this it's fine with that.
Mika, you want to?
Yes, I would just say Sweden has been successful in that way that we have a high level of participation in general. We saw the numbers earlier on. So in that way, yes, we've been successful somewhat, but still, and we have a more diverse cultural life today than we had some years ago, but still we have not kept up with the change in society in general, and that's our problem.
Yeah. And take another question.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions for Jim. We're working on an entrepreneurial type of organization in Toronto, Canada, to build a center for individual musicians. They don't have a place to come together, exchange ideas, etc. And so we're using government funding as seed money, more or less. I'm interested to know, from the 22 million, I don't know, I guess pounds, right? Where did that come from? Was that corporate? Was that individual donors? And then, using that money, you've built what you've built. What about sustaining it? Do you have rentals that you earn from? I mean, how does that work?
So, big chunk of European money, about 4 million, about 8 million of loans, but from the city, kind of nice loans, not bank loans. And then a lot of trust and foundation money, and quite a chunk of lottery money, arts lottery and heritage lottery money. So that's how the 22 million gets made up. And it is, well, if it works in October, there'll be an income of about £500,000 net that we will then invest back into programs. So it is self-sustaining. It's never been about not wanting more Arts Council money. I should just be clear about this. It's never been about being independent of any sort of form of sector with the city or the Arts Council. It has simply been a pragmatic reaction to, my God, in the future this isn't going to work.
Did you use bonds by any chance, where you sold bonds, which are investments, and then you take time to pay them back?
We've looked at bonds, and I was talking to somebody who is doing that right now. I can't remember who it is, but I will remember. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so we just have a few minutes yet. So put the money question aside. What is in your thinking ahead over into the next 5 years or so? What is it that you would most wish for in terms of what you do that would really make a difference going forward in reaching new audiences in this whole question of access? Jim?
Well, we have a plan. We're rolling the plan out, and in 5 years' time, if we're, working with 20,000 young people across the region and improving their literacy, we are much more than a theatre. Not that just being a theatre isn't a brilliant thing to be, but we are doing something for our place, our city, and our region. I think that would be a good place to be.
And you think this is replicable?
It is. Well, I know it is. I know it is. Yeah.
Yes. Good.
Yes, I mean, not responsible for the whole Sweden because it is in collaboration, but of course it's the things that we have been spoken about here is so important. How do we make access for people that has been too far on the side? And that's also about on stage, behind stage, but also in the audience. And then, of course, we need to be aware of that will hurt. If we do that change, it will hurt a lot because we need to change the structure of doing how we do performing art and how we, what kind of stories and how we get to them. And also as a leader of a big institution, it's a total difference today than it was 10 years ago, and how you deal with all these creative people and make them a place to be, and not a place just for a project, and something that really continue and has stability for the future. So that's something that we in our organization try to see how can we deal with that for the future. And we need to change, and it's a big change coming up. And I think this accessibility today is, we have been talking about this so long, but today, before the politics says, please measure now, and if you don't, we don't give you money, we need to do that ourselves.
Adolphe?
Well, I'm representing also specific art forms, so from this angle, my wish would be, of course, in organizations that have also representation of more classical art forms, traditional art forms, to increase the level of respect and understanding, especially in terms of integrating contemporaneity into the structures, and understanding that this contemporaneity also has a different way of a different process of making. So how to adapt these structures into the futures on that level. And beyond that, hoping that the word of mouth on what is done on all these levels of dance and physical theater spreads in the society, and especially in Sweden, and in a faster pace, let's say, so that we can achieve what we have when we tour internationally on a regional level very strongly. But majorly, it's really the understanding of what the art forms of today and of the future require to bloom and blossom, and that you can create in a resonance with what is the time of today that we are sharing, rather than just strengthening in certain bigger institutions the muscle for the traditional way of doing things. So how to get different art forms together, how to increase the respect for the art forms that is also very international one, like dance, would be a hope from my side.
Mika?
Well, the Arts Council, we're not the ones doing it. So our challenge is to create funding schemes and new forms of measuring to make sure that we create the best possibilities or opportunities for the art actually to be able to flourish. And I think today we see that there is inequality also between different art forms, as Adolphe was into the professional dance, for instance, in Sweden is still very concentrated to the large cities, for instance. So there's lots to do, both in better circumstances for different art forms, but also not to be so far behind, and to keep the eye a little further on, so that we don't measure it like the way we used to do, because that's not, there's no point in measuring something from yesterday.
Right. Ulrika, we're out of time, so
Oops.
Oops. We have the oops.
But I say that, I mean, I just follow you when you say, okay, so we just have to help our members to do it, right? They're the doers. And if I look 5-10 years ahead, I really sort of envision a much broader representation of other competences within the management, because I think that it has to come from within, and then it will automatically actually do change.
Well, I want to thank you all. I will have breakfast with you any day.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Please join me in thanking the...
Thank you, Scott. Thank you.
Thank you so much, dear panel. It has been very interesting, 2 sessions in one. Now it's coffee break. Feel the energy, and I will say thank you with this instead of flowers.
Thank you.
Good, nice things.